boys and girls, and welcome to Faces in Heels, your podcast for professional wrestling here on the KB Radio Network. I am your host, Kevin Reed, and we're doing something a little unusual today. Normally, when I review TV shows or movies, it's on one of the other channels. It's either on a concession stand or Movie Goodness. But since we're talking about probably the most polarizing figure in pro wrestling history, I decided, you know what, we're going to talk about it on Faces and Heels, and we're going to review this documentary about one Vincent Kennedy McMahon Jr., yes, Mr. McMahon, the documentary series that is currently on Netflix, 6 episodes that dropped over not the weekend. When did it come out? I think on a Wednesday, on the 25th on Netflix. And I watched all 6 episodes in anticipation of learning something new about Vince McMahon, learning a different side that that's different from what we already know. If you are into the wrestling zeitgeist like I am, and I'm assuming you all are if you listen to this show, and watch this documentary series, to be more accurate, you pretty much know everything there is to know about Vince McMahon and the WWE and all of the behind the scenes stuff and this, that, and the third. So it's nothing new, and I was hoping to get something new in this show. So if you was hoping to actually learn anything about Vincent Kennedy McMahon on this Netflix 6-part documentary, Mr. McMahon, there's but one suggestion to offer. Don't waste your time. There's nothing really to learn from this show. I knew every little thing, every episode that came on. They were talking about stuff that everybody knows, even if you're not a hardcore wrestling fan, if you're not a part of the WWE universe, you know everything that they talked about already. They discussed how he purchased the WWF at the time from his father. They discussed how he created these stars, Hulk Hogan and Bret the Hitman Hart, Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, and all these other performers that came through the WWF. We heard about all that. We heard about the Monday Night Wars. Everybody knows about the Monday Night Wars with the WWE and WCW, which was epic. That was an epic time in wrestling. And we didn't need 3 or 4 episodes of that. We knew that already. Mainly everybody who watched this show wanted to hear about the most recent stuff, the most recent allegations levied against this man with the sexual assault indictment that came down on him, and him stepping away from WWE, quote unquote retiring, and then coming back, pushing his way back into the company in order to sell it to Endeavor and make billions off of that sale, which was a good move, but he did all that only for him to be basically pushed out again when more accusations came out against him. And so that's what we wanted to dive into, and that didn't really get explored until the final episode, and that was kind of handled with kid gloves, just to put it plainly. This was a weird show. Now, if you are uninitiated, if you're not into pro wrestling and you know nothing about Vince McMahon, you know nothing about the character Mr. McMahon, yeah, this is an interesting watch, to kind of delve into the mind of Vince McMahon. And so you probably would enjoy it. It wasn't a bad documentary. Me being a documentary lover, I was super excited for this. And to say that is on Netflix, which is weird within its own right when you sit back and think about it, because WWE now has this relationship with Netflix because Monday Night Raw is about to start running on Netflix after being on the USA Network since dinosaurs roamed the earth. And so now it's moving over to Netflix, I think, in January. And so they have a working relationship with the WWE now. And for this documentary to come out a few months before was kind of a head scratcher. And initially I was like, oh, they're not going to destroy this man in this documentary because it'll look bad. It'll look bad. It not only look bad for the WWE, but it'll look bad for Netflix because these are the people you're in bed with now, and you not, you know what I'm saying? So it's weird, and so I kind of went into this knowing that this isn't going to be a hit piece, and so when the documentary finally started and we started going through it, I didn't get that hit piece stuff. Now there was a few nuggets sprinkled about the 6 parts that I didn't know. I did learn some new stuff, but at the same time, it wasn't enough for me to say, okay, I'm gonna dedicate 6 hours of my life to. You know, I just felt like it was a waste of time. I felt like I wasted my time. Now I'm gonna list some of the things that I didn't know, and I'm pretty sure that there are those who are deeper in the know than I am who probably knew this was like a matter of fact thing. They already knew about all this, and I was new to the party. But in the documentary, they not only talked to Vince McMahon, you know, which I appreciated that. Well, I want to say this before I get into this. I'm getting ahead of myself here. Let me just say this about Vince McMahon from me. My stance on Vince McMahon. I've been watching wrestling as long as I can remember. I've always been a pro wrestling fan. And so the WWF at the time when I was growing up was a mainstay for me. You know, I was really just deep in it, man. I mean, around the time when I started watching it, that's when it became kind of this mainstream thing, when MTV was being linked up with it, when you had Cyndi Lauper and all that there. You had Mr. T at WrestleMania. You had Muhammad Ali as a special guest referee and stuff like that. So a lot of celebrities were getting involved in it. And Hulk Hogan was my hero at the time. And they always say never meet your heroes or never get to know them in this case, because we all know recently that Hulk Hogan is not a stand-up guy. he is no role model for anybody. So you know, it hurts my heart to realize that Hulk Hogan is the type of person that he is, because my whole childhood was Hulk Hogan. You know, I used to try to rip my shirt off constantly for that, and you know, that didn't go over too well in my house, trying to rip up shirts that my parents bought for me. But anyways, but to be honest with you, I was really, as much as I liked Hulk Hogan and I tried to emulate him, I was more of a Randy Savage guy, you know, Macho Man and Ultimate Warrior. Even though Ultimate Warrior couldn't wrestle his way out of a wet paper bag, but I just loved the charisma from him. But in any event, I always was and always will be a WWEF fan. I have been watching it since then, and I'm still watching it now. When the Monday Night Wars was going on, I chose a side. I chose WWF, even though the product was going down, and I fully acknowledged that WCW during those 83 weeks were kicking WWF's butt as far as product is concerned. But my love for the WWF was strong, and I always was a WWF guy. I chose them. Even I was going back and forth like everybody else was on Monday nights, but I chose WWF. And Vince, being as though I chose WWF, I was strongly with Vince McMahon. And I always felt that Vince McMahon was kind of the underdog. You know, me being the type of guy who always cheered for the underdog, always looked at Vince McMahon as the underdog because he's going up against this corporation. You know, you had Ted Turner and TNT going up against Vince, you know, and he came out triumphant at the end. He ended up purchasing WCW and winning the Monday Night Wars and all this other good stuff. So I always championed that. And then the stars that he created, these pro wrestlers that he helped make just mega stars in his world. I mean, for example, Dwayne The Rock Johnson. Dwayne The Rock Johnson would not be Dwayne The Rock Johnson without Vince McMahon. Let's be honest. You know, we wouldn't have Scorpion Kings and, you know, these other movies from him, the Jumanji films and all this other stuff coming from The Rock if it wasn't for Vince McMahon. You know, Dave Bautista right now, probably one of the best. That's too far. That's too much to say he's one of the best actors working, but he is constantly working in Hollywood right now. You know, John Cena is doing his thing in Hollywood right now, and that's all because of Vince. And so you got to be real with yourself, but with the good, you also got to take the bad and acknowledge that there's some bad there. Vince was not an angel, just like nobody is, but his demonic side was messed up. He was truly messed up here. But I always was a Vince guy. And, you know, it bothered me when all this stuff started a couple of years ago, at least when all the accusations was coming and he was retiring, unretiring and all that. I was clearly upset. I was really upset because, you know, I didn't know the behind the scenes story. You know, I only know the character of Mr. McMahon on screen. And so that's why I was so excited for this documentary, that maybe we can peel back some of the layers and peel this onion open and see the real Vince McMahon. We didn't get it. But in this documentary, we got interviews from a lot of pro wrestlers, a lot of people who were behind the scenes. Not, I say a lot, but not too many. You had Hulk Hogan, you had Steve Austin, you had Bret Hart, you had the Heartbreak Kid in there for a little while, Stone Cold, The Rock for a little while. You had Cody Rhodes, you had John Cena, The Undertaker, Bruce Pritchard. I can't get it out. Brother Love. And so you had all these performers who were talking about Vince McMahon, but all of them was talking highly of him, with the exception of one, Tony Atlas. Tony Atlas told it like it was. Tony Atlas was the unsung hero of this documentary show. He didn't hold anything back. He was being respectful and being disrespectful at the same time, and I didn't think that was possible, but he pulled it off. He just told the truth. He told his truth. Now, whether it's true or not, I don't know. There's no evidence to really back up the stuff he was saying, but he was very, very convincing in all the stuff he was saying. But he did acknowledge that that's just Vince, you know. Vince would do some crazy stuff, and he covered up a lot of crazy stuff. It wasn't so much that Vince was doing a lot of things. It was a lot of people around him that were doing things that Vince covered up, which makes him comparable, which makes him somewhat of an accomplice in sorts. So that was his issue. Now, Vince did do some underhanded stuff himself that was touched on in this show. Now, I think this show initially, wasn't really going to dive too much into the real mud of the situation, to get real dirty. But while they were recording it, while they were taping this documentary, that's when all the accusations came about. And so they kind of had to pivot, and you could tell the show pivoted hard. And, the real juicy stuff, the real dirty stuff with involving these accusations against Vince. That's in the last episode, and they didn't really dive deep in them. There weren't really any disgruntled ex-employees who came out and talked bad about it. It just didn't. It wasn't a hit piece like I thought it was gonna be. Or a truth-telling piece. But like I said, there were some things that I didn't know. Well, that was rumored, but it was never confirmed. But we did get some confirmation on a couple of things. It was confirmed here because it came out of his mouth, out of the horse's mouth, as they say. Hulk Hogan finally admitted that he was the one that ratted out Jesse Ventura when Jesse Ventura was trying to organize a union. Jesse Ventura has been saying this for years, and nobody confirmed it or denied it or whatever, but he has been saying that Hulk Hogan was the stool, he was the rat, he was the snitch, and nobody kind of, went to bat for him or whatever. Well, they did now. It was confirmed by Hulk Hogan himself. He told. He ratted him out. Another point that came through that I didn't know, we did kind of get a little origin story of Vince McMahon where it was kind of hinted that Vince was sexually abused as a child, and that could cause a lot of mental health, and he has mental health issues. That was also flushed out in this documentary. The man isn't there, you know what I'm saying, up there. He's fighting for his life as far as a mental health, and he never addressed it. And like a lot of people who never address their mental health, and it's just eating them from the inside out, rotten from the inside out. So, but that was never really addressed any further. They didn't really go into it. It was like mentioned, and that was that. Among other things that was mentioned, and that was that. The Ream Boy scandal. That seemed like that was news around the time that happened in the 80s. But I was young then, so I didn't really see all that. But that was messed up. That's some messed up stuff. That's on the level of the altar boy scandals in the Catholic Church. That's some messed up stuff that they were doing over there. Now, Vince wasn't, at least as far as we know, wasn't directly involved with that, but it seems to give the vibes that he protected, at least Pat Patterson, who was accused there. But that was a pretty messed up thing that I didn't know about, that I learned from the show. There was something else that I didn't write down, and I can't remember now. But in any event, it's everything else was pretty much common knowledge. There was really no diving into Vince McMahon's psyche like I thought this was, because you have an opportunity to have a sit down with Vince that you don't get. You never gotten throughout his long history of being the head group poobah of the WWF and WWE, but he didn't really touch in on a lot of stuff. I thought that he was open on some things. Now, some other I do remember. I remember now. Let me say it before I forget. The Stone Cold Steve Austin. I'm a huge Stone Cold Steve Austin fan. That's my dude. He really lost some cool points with me on this show. When he had the audacity to say he don't believe in CTE. How? It's how? And for him to say that if a wrestler gets a concussion, that's because they're not doing something right and all this here, that makes no sense, Steve. That makes no sense whatsoever. He has been concussed. He broke his neck, so I guess he wasn't doing something right either. That's just a dumb thing to say. And he had some history in his past with domestic abuse and all this here when he was married to Deborah, years back. So it isn't like he's squeaky clean here either. But yeah, he kind of lost me on that, because that's a serious thing. Taking those chair shots to the head and some of the crazy stuff they do. Not so much in the WWE anymore because they kind of cleaned that up, but AEW for certain. AEW don't care. They just do whatever. And independence and all that there, they do whatever. And there's a lot of people that enjoy that, and God bless them. But that is that is truly reckless. And when you know better, you're supposed to do better. These guys and women are putting their not only bodies on the line, but their mental capability on the line. With these spots that they're doing. And so it's a lot of stuff that comes from the CTE thing, and all that was spawned from the Chris Benoit portion of the show, which they went in depth with, which I don't understand why. This is supposed to be Vince McMahon's documentary, but instead we got long episodes that involve Chris Benoit. We got long episodes that involve the Montreal Screwjob. We got long episodes about the Monday Night Wars and all this other stuff. We know all this, but I get it for the uninitiated who don't know. This was very informative to them. But for me personally, it just didn't get there. It was like rewatching stuff that I already see. Rewatching a movie I've seen 20 times. That's what I felt like walking away from this documentary. At the end of the day, even after the accusations came out, they still didn't. They nobody really talked about it. They just read off what was all in the report and the indictment, and it's some disturbing stuff. I'm not gonna talk about it here, but it's some disturbing stuff that Vince McMahon did involving Janelle Grant. That was messed up. And if he did it to her, I can only imagine he did it to other women as well. But they didn't really dive into it. We didn't get any insight in that. And so overall, as far as the documentary is concerned, this was not good. This was not informative, and it didn't help in no shape, form, or fashion as far as how you see Vince McMahon, as far as his legacy and his stamp on professional wrestling. If you had a certain view of Vince McMahon going into this documentary series, you're going to have the same view walking out of it. It's the same thing. If you loved him, you're going to love him when he walks out of it. If you hate him, you're still going to hate him when you walk out of it. There's nothing that will kind of make you scratch your head and think about, like, maybe I should have gave this guy another chance. No, I should look at him differently or whatever. None of that. But it is what it is. But that's just my thoughts on the show. Maybe you watched it and you was informed about all of this. All this stuff, made you look at Vince McMahon differently. I would love to talk to you. Would love to talk to you because this did not move the needle for me. But I would love to know your thoughts on this 6-part documentary currently on Netflix, Mr. McMahon. Did you like it? Did you dislike it? Or do you look at Vince McMahon differently? What do you think Vince McMahon's legacy is? Let me know. Let me know. I would love to know what you think will be on his tombstone the day that he passes on. Email the show, kbradiopodcast@gmail.com. You can also search for the show on all social media platforms. Just search for the KB Radio Network. Also, you can subscribe to the KB Radio Network channel on YouTube and like this video if you don't mind. You can also give me the 5 stars, reviews, and sharing this show if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you currently listen to Faces and Heels here on the KB Radio Network. Everybody, thank you for joining me for this review of Mr. McMahon, currently on Netflix. And I will say this before I leave. I will say check it out. watch it. If you haven't watched it, I would say watch it. Even though I wasn't informed from it, I didn't really get anything from it. I would still say watch it. It is some nuggets in there that you probably didn't know, about Vince McMahon. Um, even if you hate him, watch it. Especially if you hate him, because you definitely gonna learn some stuff. Because normally, if you hate somebody, you don't want to know anything about the person and all the behind the scenes stuff and this, that, and the third. And so you might get informed in some stuff. Unfortunately for me, I was the opposite. I actually was a fan of Vince McMahon, and so I followed him professionally, and there was nothing else here for me, but it might be something there for you. So I do recommend you checking out Mr. McMahon if you haven't yet. Everybody, thank you for joining me for this review of Mr. McMahon. Can't wait to speak to you on the next go around when we recap Bad Blood. I think that's next weekend. Coming on Peacock Premium Live event. It ought to be a good one, so be on the lookout for that next weekend after the Premium Live event. Until then, everybody enjoy themselves, be well, and I'll catch you on the next round.